Hello, Kelvin Spiller is my name, and I'm a friend and neighbour of Bruno Galgano, who has been diagnosed with stage 4 inoperable lung cancer. The purpose of this video is to raise an awareness and increase understanding of the disease that he was diagnosed with in June 2015. I must admit, I don't know that much about lung cancer, which is probably similar to many other people. So Bruno, tell us your story and also what you want to achieve with this video. I might add, mate, you actually don't look unwell?
Thank you, Calvin. Yes, I mean, on the surface, I look as normal as anyone, I guess, but don't judge a book by its cover. I have a real terminal lung cancer diagnosis, and so far I've responded pretty well to the medication, which is targeted therapy, as I have a rare EGFR mutation that allows me to take a pill a day rather than chemotherapy, and to date, it's been able to control the cancer. I mean, this type of targeted therapy is now a common treatment protocol for mutated lung cancer patients. However, these cutting-edge treatments have limited effective lifespan, which varies from patient to patient. And in my situation, based on my last scan, it appears the medication may have run its course. The medication's called Tagrisso. I've been on it for 4 years, and I accessed it via a Peter Mac and AstraZeneca clinical trial, and it was PBS approved last year in February 2019. And so, you know, I'm now forced to possibly consider alternative treatment, which is a combination of different chemotherapies administered via IV. But, you know, during the last 5 years, I've had my share of challenges, including tumour partially removed from my spine, and I now have a large rod in my back and have permanent nerve damage. And I also I've had 2 bouts of targeted radiation, 2 small spots on my left lower lobe over the last 18 months. But having said that, I am very thankful and I'm very grateful, as my overall quality of life over the last 5 years living with this incurable disease has been tolerable. So I think Calvin, I've just been lucky. It's that simple. Because over the last 5 years, I've watched countless number of much younger people, some in their late 30s or early 40s, die of this disease within 2 years of their diagnosis. And it's terrible and feels like a game of Russian roulette with time. As for my own personal story, I'm 49 years old, a father of 3, children under 15. I'm divorced, but I have a partner now. He's stuck by me for the last 3.5 years, named Franco. And back in June 2015, when I was 44 years of age, I had a recurring and annoying cough, dry cough that didn't go away. And despite being prescribed 2 different types of antibiotics by my local GP, who thought it was simply a lingering chest infection, I began to hear wheezing in my breathing, especially at night. So frustrated, I asked my doctor, my GP, for a proper lung checkup, at which point I had an X-ray that revealed some concerns. And that's when I heard it for the first time, the words, "It could be lung cancer." I then had a CT scan, followed by a lung tissue biopsy, and was told I had non-small cell lung cancer, or adenocarcinoma. And it was stage 3B and was inoperable and sadly incurable. Of course, that was just shocking and devastating news, you know, and it came totally out of the blue. And unfortunately for me, it also came the day before a long-planned holiday to Bali, which I'll never forget, probably the worst holiday I've ever had, to be brutally honest. And the worst thing about this is that my local GP just had no idea, Calvin, no idea at all. And I suspect many don't, which is one of the misunderstood aspects of this disease. She was in shock about not picking this up earlier, and I just wasn't your typical candidate for lung cancer. I never smoked, I was otherwise fit and healthy, and I had no history of respiratory illness. And by the way, my story is not unusual, mate. There's many people out there similar to my age that have got this disease, and not many people know about it. And as for the objective of the video, I guess I'm simply hoping it provides an honest perspective on living with this illness after 5 years since my diagnosis, and to cover all the key concerns that make this cancer a discriminated, misrepresented, and significantly underfunded disease. In my research, I've just not found a video that adequately consolidates the real life challenges faced and told from the personal perspective of someone living with incurable lung cancer. And some of the issues I touch on may in fact be socially and politically sensitive. However, I still believe they are deserving of comment. And I also really want this video to be a legacy for my family, my children, and my friends, so that they better understand the issues I faced living with such an illness.
So you never smoked, and yet you got lung cancer. I always thought lung cancer was a smoking disease.
Yes, this is an example of misunderstanding surrounding this terrible disease called lung cancer. It's true, most people who get cancer smoked, or who get lung cancer smoked, or smoked at some point in their lifetime. But around 20%, or 1 in 5 people diagnosed with lung cancer have never smoked, like myself. And sadly, this percentage is increasing, especially in women. Currently, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 10 men who get lung cancer never smoked in their life. See, most people don't realise that all you need to get lung cancer is lungs. People simply assume that that lung cancer is a smoker's disease, and so those who get it, well, they deserve it. Importantly, people don't realise that lung cancer is the #1 cancer killer of men and women in Australia and around the world, killing more people than breast, prostate and ovarian cancers combined.
So are you saying there are more men that die annually from lung cancer than prostate cancer, and more women that die annually from lung cancer than breast cancer? Have I got that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Most people don't realise this because they simply don't know. I mean, globally, the World Health Organization, WHO, issued a report in 2018 titled The Global Cancer Burden, which ranked lung cancer as clearly the #1 global cancer killer, killing around 1.8 million people in 2018. In that year, breast cancer was ranked 5th at 657,000 deaths globally, and prostate cancer ranked 8th with around 435,000 deaths. I mean, this is supported by this bar graph, which was prepared in 2017 by Our World in Data, a collaborative cancer analysis involving Oxford University, where the numbers are very similar to 2018. I point out that the bar graph includes tracheal and bronchus cancers because they are also connected to the lung and are considered forms of lung cancer, although they are a very small percentage of the overall lung cancer numbers. Now, in the context of Australia, Cancer Australia has issued and released cancer data for 2020. This data covers the estimated number of 2020 cancer diagnoses, as well as estimated number of cancer deaths. Now, you can see clearly from the first slide that breast and prostate cancers accounted for the highest diagnosis in 2020 compared to lung cancer. It's around 3 times as many, basically. However, to be honest, the key statistic we should all be concerned about is the number of deaths. And sadly, that's a real horror story for lung cancer, as you can see, with 3,000 more deaths estimated from lung cancer in 2020 compared to the combination of breast and prostate cancer.
Is that right, Bruno? That's a shocking fact. I certainly didn't know that, and I'm sure many other people didn't.
Yes, it's a very sad, and the reason you and most don't know this is because there is not enough light shone on lung cancer in our society, especially by our federal and state governments. I mean, when was the last time you saw a comprehensive and consistently promoted campaign, be it on radio and TV? aimed at elevating awareness around lung cancer by our governments? None. To me, the last national campaign that we've all been bombarded with was a campaign for bowel cancer that commenced around mid-2019 and continues today. Lung cancer is fundamentally the cancer that no one wants to talk about, Calvin, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever when it's the #1 cancer killer, killing more Australians than breast, prostate and ovarian combined. I mean, do you see the frustration and discrimination? The cancer with the highest mortality rate of all gets by far the lowest attention, lowest support and lowest level of funding. And lung cancer patients suffer from social stigma.
So why is there so much stigma in relation to lung cancer?
Yeah, I think it's deeply rooted in the change in society's perception over the last 30 years with the anti-smoking campaigns that worked effectively to create public awareness of the health risks associated with smoking. I mean, the grotesque images on packets of cigarettes added to this negative and socially ingrained sentiment. Research conducted by Lung Foundation Australia has shown that around 35% of Australians believe people who get lung cancer only have themselves to blame. I mean, I certainly don't condone smoking, and I don't like it myself. But in my experience over the last 5 years, it's clear to me that people automatically assume those who get lung cancer smoked. Yet 1 in 5 people, or 20%, never smoked, and this number is increasing, and no one knows about this. And this is a terrible situation. But even if people smoked, there should be no stigma or unfair judgment. I mean, just like there's no stigma around having a drink, and we all know alcohol's linked to many diseases, including heart disease, throat and liver cancers. I mean, similarly, the way there's no stigma surrounding melanoma, which most of us definitely know is directly linked to too much sun exposure, and we've all been warned about how harmful too much sun is, with successful campaigns in the past, such as Slip, Slop, Slap, that started, I recall, maybe in the mid-80s. And I watched quite often as I was growing up as a young kid. So the important point I really want to make is every hour an Australian watches a loved one die of lung cancer. So regardless of the cause of lung cancer, the only response should be of compassion for lung cancer patients, rather than unfair discrimination based on social stigma. There is also very low public awareness, and it's no doubt the reason why there is no single dedicated charity in the country for lung cancer, despite it being the #1 cancer killer of men and women. I mean, it just sounds absurd. Even the high-profile charity Movember, which is all about men's health and keeping as many men alive as possible, ignores lung cancer as the #1 cancer killer of men, choosing to focus on, obviously prostate and also testicular cancers, which have much lower mortality rates. I mean, how can that be explained other than by the stigma attached to smoking and unfairly attributed to lung cancer patients? But you compare this to the many dedicated charities supporting breast and prostate cancer in this country, and we know many of them. And it's clear that no one with a high profile in media wants to champion lung cancer because of the negativity surrounding its connection to smoking, unlike other cancers, especially breast cancer. I mean, I've personally written to various TV and radio talkback shows over the years, such as, The Project, A Current Affair, 3AW, Kiss FM, and none have replied to consider a segment. I mean, the Real for Monty, a recent program aired on Channel 7 called Guys and Gals, is another example of the bias towards those high-profile cancers, being prostate, testicular cancers for men, and of course breast cancer for women. I mean, to suggest that prostate and testicular cancer is at the centre of men's health crisis is a difficult one to comprehend when presented with the startling fact that we lost 2,090 more Australian men to lung cancer in 2019 than the combination of prostate and testicular cancer. And then similarly, that program on Channel 7 focused solely on breast cancer for women. Yet 850 more Australian women died of lung cancer than breast cancer in 2019. I guess for all these reasons, I simply think that the state and federal government do not treat lung cancer as a national health priority compared to other cancers, which is effectively discrimination. But having said that, I must acknowledge the outstanding work of the Lung Foundation Australia, or the LFA. The LFA fights for all Australians living with some form of lung disease. Presently, around a third of all Australians, or around 7 to 8 million people, live with some form of respiratory-related lung disease. I mean, it's ranging from asthma all the way to lung cancer. And the LFA are the only organisation proactively supporting lung cancer in Australia at the moment. And during the last 2 years, they've introduced some great initiatives and have been advocating strongly on behalf of the lung cancer community in areas such as the Aspiration Project, which is Australia's first genomic profiling research project to support personalised treatment for lung cancer patients. They run an annual Shine a Light campaign and a gala dinner to raise funds and awareness for lung cancer. And they advocate strongly for more nurses and provide funding support for lung cancer and a nurse support telephone service. They also led the preparation of the National Strategic Plan for Lung Conditions with Cancer Australia that was completed in February 2019 and aimed at prioritising and recommending actions to improve lung health in the country. So the efforts of the Lung Foundation, LFA, culminated in the organisation receiving, 2 Prime Awards in 2020, which is fantastic, and that was for NGO of the Year Award and Best Use of Data and Insights Award. So on behalf of the lung cancer community, I want to personally congratulate and thank the entire LFA team for their effort and ongoing support of lung cancer. However, despite all the great work of the Lung Foundation Australia, the fact clearly remains there is strong discrimination against and very clear funding inequity for lung cancer in this country.
What do you mean when you say discrimination against lung cancer? In what way does this occur, Bruno?
I think the facts make it very clear that there is significant discrimination in terms of funding research, public awareness and nursing support. I mean, just take a look at the 2020 lung cancer scorecard. Now you can see the horizontal bars in green represent lung cancer and how it tracks against breast cancer, shown in pink, in the pink bar, and prostate cancer, shown by the blue bar. Now, the mortality rate is much higher in lung cancer, as I mentioned. We've lost around 9,034 people to lung cancer in 2019 compared to around 6,400 people for both breast and prostate cancer. And the survival rate, the 5-year survival rate for lung cancer is around 17%. Now you compare this to around 93% for the average of both breast and prostate cancer. An early stage diagnosis of lung cancer is very low, at around 11.7%. And in fact, around 50% of those diagnosed are diagnosed when it's too late and the disease becomes incurable, which is really sad. But you compare this to an average of 40% for breast and prostate cancers, which gives people greater hope that the cancer's identified in an early stage and that can be cured. And sadly, there is currently no national program for lung cancer screening. And we all know that there is a national program for breast cancer. And there are around 12 nurses nationally dedicated to lung cancer, supporting around 12,000 patients.
Only 12? Really? That makes no sense.
Yes, it certainly does not make sense, especially when you compare this to an average of well over 500 nurses dedicated to breast and prostate cancer, and more funding pledged of around 23 million for prostate cancer nurses based on the July 2020 federal budget announcements. And lastly, our government discriminates against lung cancer, allocating around $5 million over 2 years. I mean, you compare this to around an average of $42 million over 2 years for breast and prostate cancer. I mean, do the math. That's around 8.5 times more research funding. Now, how is that conceivably appropriate and fair? And overlaying this and adding salt to our wounds is the terrible unspoken reality that poor mental health outcomes are 35% higher in lung cancer than any other cancers. And research has shown that lung cancer patients are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than the general population.
Do you think the federal government is really aware of the appalling situation facing lung cancer patients in Australia? I mean, the information that's been presented to them, has it been done in a compelling way to highlight the gross inequity?
Yes, they most definitely are. It's staggering they just don't act decisively on these facts. They are simply overlooked. I mean, I've met both the Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt. Both are very well aware of the lung cancer facts and obviously present well for the public.
A Melbourne man still alive thanks to a revolutionary lung cancer drug has welcomed its addition to the PBS. The Prime Minister made the announcement in Ringwood, bringing hope for thousands of sufferers.
It was a diagnosis Bruno Galgano never saw coming.
Now my life's completely changed. My planning is only about keeping alive.
A fit and active dad to his 3 young children, the 49-year-old has never been a smoker. But due to a mutated gene, he's in the fight of his life with stage 3 lung cancer.
The mutation has allowed me to access targeted therapies.
Diagnosed 4 years ago, he's alive today because of Tagrisso.
I've also separately met with Minister Hunt at his electoral office and spent almost an hour with him advocating for lung cancer cause. And I had the 1-page lung cancer scorecard that I mentioned before. And yet he could not look me in the eye and acknowledge that the situation is unfair for lung cancer patients. But the Minister has, however, publicly acknowledged the stigma.
As I say this, I also want to acknowledge the words of Bruno, whom the Prime Minister met with me earlier this year when we made Tagrisso available. I saw Bruno very recently. He's doing well, but he made the point that many lung cancer patients live with stigma. So on behalf of Bruno, I want to say, doesn't matter what the condition is. We are here to fight for you, to make those medicines available. And Bruno, on your behalf, and through myself and the Prime Minister, we are saying that there should be no condition which is subject to stigma.
So you've just heard the Minister publicly state in November 2019, and I quote, that there should be no stigma around any illness or condition and that the federal government will fight for us. Powerful and encouraging words, most would agree. However, that's where it ends. They are only words. Because 7 months after saying this, on the 15th of June 2020, his government pledged $23 million to fund more nurses for prostate cancer and made no hopeful reference whatsoever for lung cancer patients in desperate need of more nurses.
Cancer care nurses are extremely valuable.
Can you just confirm to me, the Commonwealth doesn't currently provide any specific funding for lung cancer nurses, is that correct?
That's correct.
Oh, so the Commonwealth does provide direct support for breast and prostate cancer nurses as specialists in those areas, but not for lung cancer?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you see the problem? It's just demoralising. It's very clear to me that there is nothing ethically or morally just in the way national health priorities are set in this country. The health system has become too complicated and the government has become too disconnected from the essence of its true role to protect the lives of its citizens who elected them to power. And by that, I certainly don't mean that we need more invested into our military capability, which most governments pour billions of dollars into each year because we should all fear a global war. No, I'm talking about investing in the very real humanitarian war against this invisible cellular enemy, which is cancer, especially lung cancer, that each and every day is killing around 5,000 people around the world and destroying families. And that is why I personally find the words such as hope and stay positive, which are so often used and in fact abused, especially by our politicians in the context of cancer. It's clear, based on the facts and evidence, that whilst new medicines are now helping prolong lives, lung cancer remains a very high terminal condition for most of us. And that's totally disheartening, demoralising for those diagnosed and their immediate families.
That is so sad to hear, Bruno. I'm so sorry. And now, of course, we have COVID-19. So how has COVID impacted your life?
Yeah, no, good question, Calvin. We all know COVID-19 has changed the world, and life as we know it has changed forever. I mean, COVID-19 is currently an incurable respiratory disease, and we all hope that a vaccine is on its way, and it appears it might be soon. But don't forget that lung cancer is an incurable respiratory disease too. Personally, and I think I speak on behalf of many other like-minded cancer patients, that the feelings that people have experienced during the COVID lockdowns, the feeling of isolation, fear, anxiety, anger, helplessness, and a greater awareness of one's own mortality are, to a small extent, the feelings that cancer patients and their families experience each and every day. And I for one, there is no doubt my condition, my diagnosis has heightened my sensitivity to injustice, inequity, and discrimination, which is why I'm here today speaking out. I'm certainly not trying to trivialise the severity of COVID-19. It's a very real, dangerous virus for some, as we all know, and sadly, based on the data to date, a highly deadly one for our most vulnerable elderly citizens and people like myself, other cancer patients and people with pre-existing respiratory conditions or compromised immune systems. But Calvin, please consider this. Over the last 11 and a half months, we've lost, sadly, around 907 Australians to COVID-19. However, it still needs to be put into some sensible perspective vis-a-vis lung cancer, because of the same 11 and a half month period as COVID tragically took the lives of 907 Australians, our country lost the equivalent of 8,720 Australians to lung cancer. Now that is a huge difference, yet no one bats an eyelid to this brutal reality for lung cancer patients and their families, especially our leaders of government who say they will fight for us. And the only reason is that the word contagious changes the narrative completely. The number of lung cancer deaths as a percentage of the population has remained consistently high the last 50 years. Now I ask you, please, why isn't that a good enough reason to change the narrative around the country's #1 cancer killer? The irony is, in perhaps 5-10 years from now, or maybe less, when people look back on this, very tough experience with COVID, they may inevitably come to the conclusion that our state government's strict and draconian lockdown rules, in which businesses, livelihoods, social freedoms, and mental health have been hit hard, was a necessary imposition to fundamentally protect a deserving minority, being the vulnerable elderly who, we all know accounted for well over 90% of the COVID deaths in our country, whilst the vast majority of others and the vast population of healthy people only experience mild symptoms. So personally, it actually infuriates me to know that people unfortunately diagnosed with cancer, particularly lung cancer patients, are not treated fairly as an equally deserving minority and extended the same level of government focus, compassion, support to stay alive. And it's simply because it's not a contagious illness. Since when is it okay that we as a human race do not think millions of lives lost each year to cancer and millions more families destroyed because of it is not sufficient reason for there to be a globally concerted effort to make cancer a manageable chronic illness rather than a terminal one? I'm absolutely sure that the families of the 50,000 Australians who die each year of cancer, 9,000 of which die of lung cancer alone, might agree with me.
I must say, Bruno, it's very disheartening to hear you explain about the plight of lung cancer patients in this country. People do need to be informed about the reality so that they can make a difference rather than just be opinionated. You've certainly opened up my eyes, Bruno, in relation to lung cancer and of those watching this video. So what's the final message that you want to leave about lung cancer?
I want to advocate on behalf of many lung cancer patients around the country and around the world, unable, afraid, or embarrassed to speak publicly out about this issue. As a proud Australian, and on behalf of the estimated 12,000 plus Australians who have been diagnosed or will be diagnosed with lung cancer each year, and the estimated 9,000 plus that will sadly die each year, please help raise much needed awareness that we need more nurses and more funding for critical research to keep more of us alive. Over the next 8 years, nearly 270,000 Australians are expected to be living with lung cancer. And the estimated economic cost of lung cancer is expected to be approximately $6.6 billion per annum by the end of 2028. Well over 50% of newly diagnosed lung cancer patients will receive an incurable diagnosis due to the lack of early detection measures. There is no doubting our government has heard our cries for help, but sadly lack the moral and ethical conviction to make it a level playing field for lung cancer cause. We urgently need a fair go. And it starts with an engaging national health campaign that helps to overcome the stigma and discrimination so that we can lay the foundation for a fair and just space to elevate the lung cancer cause across the country. The campaign needs to change the narrative around lung cancer and let people know that lung cancer is a #1 cancer killer, killing more men and women than breast, prostate and ovarian combined. As no one really knows this important fact, and in fact if they did, they just might help increase the focus on lung cancer and help alleviate the stigma. The campaign needs to strongly amplify the fact that if you have lungs, are otherwise fit and healthy, you can potentially get lung cancer. It's not just a smoker's disease. You just ask the 1 in 5 Australian lung cancer patients who never smoked. In raising this awareness through a national campaign, it is hoped we can finally convince the government to give lung cancer a fair go and increase funding for this discriminated disease and provide critically needed nursing support to lung cancer patients. I mean, just 12 nurses nationally supporting 12,000 patients is an embarrassment and a disgrace when there are well over 500 to 600 nurses supporting breast and prostate cancer patients in the country. You know, a charity that is dedicated solely to lung cancer with a national champion is desperately needed to help change the lung cancer narrative. Early detection is essential to help save lives, and it starts at the grassroots level with local GPs needing to be educated on the early signs of potential lung cancer symptoms. I mean, my own personal experience where I got a too late diagnosis is proof local GPs need more education on lung cancer to help save lives. Please help save future lives and breathe life into lung cancer. The life you may save might be your own or that of someone you love.